Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here together today talking about something we don't always discuss directly, the role of silence in our lives. Silence can feel a lot like vulnerability. It requires patience, courage, and a kind of trust both in others and in ourselves. But here's the thing, sometimes the most powerful way to engage is by stepping back and simply listening. I'd like to share with you 5 situations when silence can serve as our greatest tool, and I hope these thoughts resonate with each of you in your own journeys. When we're angry, silence can become one of our most powerful tools. Anger is a natural emotion. It's one we all feel, sometimes intensely, and sometimes with the urge to act immediately. Anger can arise out of hurt, injustice, fear, and frustration, and often these feelings are raw and unfiltered. But in the moment, anger can lead us to say and do things that we later regret. It can push us to react rather than respond. And when we respond from a place of anger, we often lose the chance to truly understand ourselves and the real reasons behind our reaction. Silence and anger is not about bottling up our feelings or suppressing our need to communicate. Instead, it's about creating a small but essential pause between what we're feeling and how we act on that feeling. There is something deeply transformative about giving ourselves just a few moments of silence before we respond, especially when we feel that impulse to lash out or retaliate. Silence and anger allows us to listen to what's going on within us, to identify the true source of the emotion, and to respond from a place of integrity rather than impulse. One of the main reasons anger is so potent is because it often stems from pain or vulnerability. Anger is a secondary emotion that usually points to something deeper, feelings of rejection, disrespect, or fear. When someone says or does something that sparks our anger, it's often because on some level we feel hurt or threatened, but if we react instantly, we rarely give ourselves time to acknowledge or explore these underlying emotions. Instead, we project our pain outward. This can lead us to say hurtful things or act in ways that don't align with our values, simply because we're trying to defend or protect ourselves in the heat of the moment. Silence, on the other hand, gives us the time and space to look inward before we act outward. This pause can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if we're used to quickly voicing our thoughts and emotions. But the discomfort is part of the process. It's a signal that we're choosing a different path, one that values reflection over reactivity. In that moment of silence, we can ask ourselves questions like, what is this anger trying to tell me? Or what am I really feeling underneath this anger? These questions help us get to the core of what's really going on. And once we understand that, we're in a better position to communicate it constructively. Another benefit of silence and anger is that it can prevent us from escalating a situation that might already be charged. When 2 people are angry, it's easy for conversations to spiral out of control, with each person feeding off the other's energy. This is often how small disagreements turn into big arguments and how misunderstandings lead to broken relationships. By choosing silence in the face of anger, we can break this cycle. We can give ourselves time to calm down and approach the conversation from a place of understanding rather than continuing to fuel the fire. There's also a significant impact of silence on the people around us. When we choose to remain silent in moments of anger, we're not only calming ourselves down, we're also showing others that we're committed to thoughtful communication. This doesn't mean we're dismissing our feelings or letting someone off the hook. It means we're taking responsibility for our emotions and choosing to express them in a way that leads to healing rather than harm. In many ways, silence and anger can be an act of self-respect. When we give ourselves permission to pause, we're acknowledging that our emotions matter, but that they don't have to control us. Silence in moments of gossip can be one of the most powerful decisions we make, yet it's also one of the hardest. Gossip often seems harmless or even helpful, especially when it's cloaked as concern or as sharing facts about someone who isn't present. The truth is, gossip has a strange magnetism. It draws people together, makes us feel connected like we're part of something exclusive or in the know, but gossip is rarely innocent. It often involves assumptions, half-truths, and judgments about someone's life, usually someone who isn't present to defend themselves or clarify the situation. When we choose silence in moments of gossip, we're making a deliberate choice to honor our integrity and the dignity of others. It can be easy to get pulled into gossip because it's often framed as a bonding experience, a way of finding common ground. There's a sense of camaraderie that can come from sharing secrets or mutual complaints, especially when it comes to discussing someone else's flaws or life choices. However, that sense of bonding is fragile and fleeting, built on negativity rather than authenticity. Choosing to remain silent when gossip arises is a way of stepping back from that kind of connection. It's saying, I value something more lasting, more genuine than a quick connection based on someone else's story. Silence in gossip can also act as a quiet but powerful statement of respect. By choosing not to participate, we show that we respect others, even if they're not around to see it. We may not know the full story behind someone's actions or choices, and refraining from gossip acknowledges that truth. It's easy to form judgments when we have only pieces of information, but in our silence, we acknowledge that there are parts of the story we don't understand. We honor that person's right to their own narrative, and in doing so, we create a subtle but meaningful boundary that keeps judgment at bay. Choosing silence in moments of gossip also protects us from our own tendencies to judge, compare, or criticize. Gossip can sometimes be a way of masking our own insecurities. When we point out someone else's perceived flaws, we often do so to feel better about our own. It can be tempting to criticize or speculate about others as a way to feel a sense of superiority, but this mindset usually backfires, leaving us feeling more insecure or judgmental in the long run. When we choose silence, we protect ourselves from this trap. Silence allows us to break the cycle of comparison, freeing us to focus on our own lives rather than dwelling on the lives of others. This choice often leads to a greater sense of inner peace because we're no longer feeding the negativity that gossip creates. Another reason silence in gossip is so impactful is that it can influence others in the room. Silence doesn't mean we're passive or that we're okay with the gossip happening around us. It can actually communicate quite the opposite. By remaining silent, we're signaling that we don't condone the conversation. Our silence can create a subtle, unspoken challenge, inviting others to pause and consider their own participation in gossip. We might even inspire someone else to choose silence too, simply by modeling the power of restraint. And if someone directly asks us for our opinion, we can use this moment to gently redirect or express that we'd rather not speak about someone who isn't present. This can shift the energy in the room, sometimes encouraging a deeper, more constructive conversation instead. Remaining silent in gossip also helps to cultivate trustworthiness. People often look for those who they know can keep confidences, who won't use someone else's story as a form of entertainment or social leverage. When we choose not to engage in gossip, others notice. Over time, we become known as someone who values integrity and doesn't participate in tearing others down. This kind of reputation is invaluable. It shows that we're trustworthy, that we don't thrive on drama or negativity, and that we can be counted on to respect others' privacy. Silence, in this case, builds our own credibility and establishes us as someone who chooses to connect with people authentically, rather than through idle speculation. Finally, silence in gossip is a choice that aligns with our values and self-respect. Engaging in gossip can often leave us feeling uneasy or even guilty, especially if we know that what was shared may have been hurtful or misrepresented someone's truth. When we choose silence, we make a commitment to living with integrity and honoring our own moral compass. This silence isn't about avoiding discomfort or staying neutral. It's about actively deciding what kind of person we want to be and how we want to show up in our relationships. In the end, silence in gossip protects not only the person being spoken about, but also our own sense of inner peace, dignity, and connection. It's a reminder that we can still be a part of the group, but on our own terms, choosing respect over judgment, integrity over fleeting approval, and peace over drama. Silence is one of the most powerful tools we can bring to any conversation, especially when we're listening to someone share their story. In a world that values quick responses, advice giving, and constant feedback, simply listening without interrupting or interjecting is almost an act of defiance. We're often trained to think that a good listener is someone who offers insights or solutions, but sometimes the best gift we can give is silence. Silence, in this context, is a form of deep respect and presence. It's a way of holding space for someone else to share without the pressure of having to hurry, defend, or explain themselves. When someone shares their story with us, especially if it's a personal or difficult one, they're stepping into a vulnerable space. They're showing us parts of themselves that they may not reveal to many others, perhaps sharing struggles, failures, or dreams that they hold close to their heart. In these moments, there's a sacredness in simply being present with them. And silence can communicate a kind of acceptance that words often fail to capture. By remaining silent, we're saying, I'm here with you and I'm listening. We're allowing them the space to tell their story fully, without interruption or distraction. Silence, when listening, also encourages authenticity. When we hold back from offering our own thoughts or advice, we're giving the other person the freedom to speak openly, knowing they won't be interrupted or judged. People tend to open up more when they feel that their listener is genuinely interested and not just waiting for their turn to talk. This kind of listening is rare and deeply meaningful because it allows the speaker to explore their own thoughts and feelings without the need to edit themselves for fear of criticism or unsolicited feedback. Silence gives people permission to be honest with themselves as they express their story. Another powerful aspect of silence when listening is that it enables us to hear what's beneath the words. Often people share things in layers. They might start with surface details or with something that feels safe to talk about. But as they sense our silence, our lack of immediate judgment or response, they may feel encouraged to go deeper, to share what they're really feeling, or to explore parts of the story that are more painful or complex. Silence creates a sense of safety, allowing the speaker to move beyond rehearsed narratives and touch on what they truly want to express. This is where real connection happens. When we allow someone the space to unfold their story in their own way, they may come to insights they hadn't realized or find clarity that comes only from speaking their truth out loud. Silence also creates a kind of rhythm in the conversation that's driven by the speaker, not the listener. In most conversations, we're often so busy formulating our next thought or response that we lose track of the natural flow of someone's story. But in silence, we're fully focused on what they're saying, following the direction they take rather than trying to guide them. This creates a powerful shift as the speaker feels empowered to guide the conversation and express themselves at their own pace. Sometimes when we're sharing something close to our hearts, we need those moments of quiet, those pauses to gather our thoughts or find the right words. Silence, rather than filling those pauses, allows the speaker to take their time and express their story fully without the pressure to rush. Moreover, silence, when listening, conveys a level of empathy and understanding that words often can't reach. When someone is sharing something difficult, there's often an impulse to offer comforting words, advice, or personal anecdotes. While these are often well-intentioned, they can unintentionally shift the focus away from the speaker's experience and onto the listener's perspective. Silence, on the other hand, leaves all the attention on the speaker, giving them a sense of being fully seen and heard. It tells them this moment is for you. In that moment of listening, we're acknowledging that their experience is valid, that it deserves the full space of the conversation, and that we're not here to fix it, but to witness it with compassion. Silence also helps us as listeners to cultivate humility. In a world where everyone seems to have an opinion or advice to share, choosing silence reminds us that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. By not jumping in with our own views or solutions, we're recognizing that the speaker is the expert of their own story. We're offering them a mirror, a quiet space to process their feelings without our input. This is a humble act of giving up control over the conversation and allowing it to unfold naturally as it was meant to. In choosing silence, we're not just refraining from speaking, we're actively creating a space for the speaker to feel safe, respected, and understood. This silence isn't empty, it's full of presence, empathy, and compassion. It's a quiet affirmation that in this moment, the person sharing their story matters most. Silence in moments of conflict is one of the most powerful yet underused approaches to handling tension and disagreement. When emotions run high and opinions clash, the natural impulse is often to react quickly, to defend our perspective, or to make sure we're heard. However, speaking too soon in these situations can escalate the conflict, closing off opportunities for understanding and resolution. In conflict, silence can create a necessary pause, allowing both sides to step back, gain perspective, and think before reacting. One of the reasons silence is so powerful in conflict is that it provides space for emotional processing. When we're in the heat of a disagreement, it's easy to let anger, frustration, or hurt guide our words. These emotions can drive us to say things impulsively, things we don't truly mean, or that may come across harsher than intended. Silence allows us to breathe and calm our emotions before we respond, helping us to avoid statements that might cause unnecessary harm or further escalate the situation. In this way, silence isn't passive, it's a deliberate choice to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. In moments of conflict, silence also creates a buffer that encourages listening. When one person is silent, it opens up space for the other to speak, which is often what they're seeking in moments of disagreement. Many conflicts are fueled by a feeling of not being heard or understood, and silence can signal a willingness to truly listen. When we stop speaking and allow the other person to express themselves fully, we create a moment where empathy can enter the conversation. Even if we don't agree with their perspective, our silence shows respect for their feelings and experiences, validating their right to be heard. Furthermore, silence in conflict can help diffuse defensiveness. When we feel under attack or misunderstood, the natural response is to defend ourselves, sometimes aggressively. But silence can change the tone of the conversation, reducing the fight or flight reflex that often arises in conflict. By staying silent, we signal that we're not there to argue or push back, which can help the other person feel less defensive and more willing to open up. Silence offers a chance for both people to step back and consider the other's perspective without the noise of ongoing argument. Silence also encourages reflection. In the middle of a conflict, it's easy to focus solely on winning the argument or proving a point. But when we choose silence, we create a moment to step back and reflect on the bigger picture. What are we really arguing about? What's at the root of the disagreement? Silence allows us to consider these questions without the distraction of back and forth debate. This moment of pause can often reveal deeper issues beneath the surface argument, issues that might be driving the conflict but haven't yet been addressed. By pausing to reflect, we gain a clearer understanding of our own feelings and needs, which can lead to a more constructive response. Another benefit of silence in conflict is that it can prevent escalation. Conflicts often escalate because each person feels the need to respond to the other's statements immediately, leading to a cycle of reaction and counter-reaction. And when we respond too quickly, we're often reacting to the other person's last words rather than considering the core issue. Silence interrupts this pattern, breaking the momentum of the argument. When we choose not to respond right away, it can surprise the other person, creating a moment of pause on their end as well. This can prevent both sides from saying things in the heat of the moment that they may later regret. Silence also demonstrates self-control and emotional maturity. In conflict, it's easy to be swept up by emotions, to let frustration or anger drive our responses. But choosing silence shows that we have the ability to regulate our own emotions and that we're not allowing the conflict to control us. This kind of composure can actually shift the dynamic of the conversation as it sets a tone of calmness and respect. The other person may feel more inclined to match that tone, creating a more productive environment for resolving the disagreement. In addition, silence can foster introspection in the other person. When we don't respond right away, it often causes the other person to consider their own words and actions. They may start to question whether their approach is helpful or if their words are fair. Silence can encourage them to reflect on their role in the conflict as they're given a moment to think about what they've said without the immediate distraction of a rebuttal. This introspection can sometimes lead to a softening of their stance, making them more open to compromise or reconciliation. Lastly, silence in conflict shows respect for the relationship itself. By choosing not to jump into the fray, we demonstrate that we care enough to seek a resolution rather than simply winning the argument. Silence shows that we're willing to put the health of the relationship above our own ego or the need to be right. This perspective can create a foundation of mutual respect and trust, even in the midst of disagreement. In the end, choosing silence in pivotal moments, whether in anger, gossip, listening, or conflict, is not about retreating or withholding ourselves from others. It's about creating space for intentional thought, compassion, and true connection. Silence can be a transformative force, giving us the clarity to respond rather than react, the humility to listen without judgment, and the courage to let go of the need to dominate or control. By embracing silence, we invite deeper understanding and build trust, respect, and empathy into our interactions. In a world that often equates value with volume, silence can be our most eloquent and impactful response.